On the morning of December 7, 1941, as the first pale light of dawn spread across the still waters of Pearl Harbor, no one aboard the American battleships could have imagined that history was about to fracture into a before and an after. Sunday routines were underway, breakfast bells echoed through steel corridors, and the Pacific Fleet lay anchored in neat rows, a floating symbol of American confidence and industrial might. Among them sat USS Nevada BB-36, positioned alone at the southern end of Battleship Row, an aging but proud warship that had already seen decades of service. Nevada was not the newest ship in the harbor, nor the largest, but she carried something that would soon matter more than firepower or armor readiness born of discipline and leadership. At 7:55 a.m. the sky erupted. Japanese aircraft tore through the clouds, their engines screaming as the first bombs struck Ford Island. In seconds, the harbor transformed into an inferno. Explosions ripped through hulls, fuel ignited on the water's surface, and black smoke climbed thousands of feet into the air. Men ran barefoot across decks slick with oil and blood. Battleships that had been thought unsinkable began to list and capsize. The attack was so sudden and so violent that for many crews, there was no chance to fight back. Yet aboard Nevada, confusion gave way to action. As the first bombs fell nearby, officers recognized immediately that this was no drill. Orders were shouted, alarms sounded, and men rushed to anti-aircraft guns even as shrapnel cut through the air around them. Nevada's gunners opened fire within minutes, becoming the first battleship at Pearl Harbor to return fire against the attackers. Shells arced skyward, black puffs of smoke, marking where Japanese planes flew low and fast. The ship shuddered as a torpedo slammed into her port side, tearing open compartments and flooding her hull. Flames leapt from damaged structures. Casualties mounted. Still, Nevada's engines came alive. Against all odds, the battleship began to move. Slowly at first, then with gathering determination, Nevada slipped her moorings and steamed forward, her massive propellers churning the harbor water as she made a break for open sea. In that moment, she became the only battleship to get underway during the attack, a moving target in a harbor of dying giants. Japanese pilots immediately recognized the danger. If Nevada sank in the channel, she could block the harbor entrance and trap the Pacific Fleet inside. The order went out to destroy her. Dive bombers peeled off from their attack runs and focused their full fury on the lone moving ship. Bombs struck her forecastle, her superstructure, her decks. Fires raged out of control. Men were blown from their gun positions. Yet Nevada continued forward, smoke pouring from her like a signal flare of defiance. The decision that followed would save Pearl Harbor. Realizing the risk, Nevada's captain ordered the ship run aground near Hospital Point. With controlled desperation, the battleship was beached, her hull settling into shallow water as flames continued to burn. Nevada had survived not unscathed, not unbroken, but alive. When the attack ended and the smoke began to clear, the harbor revealed a scene of devastation unlike anything America had ever witnessed. Arizona burned, Oklahoma lay overturned, West Virginia smoldered. Nevada, battered and wounded, stood apart as the ship that had fought back. In the days that followed, she became a symbol. Newspapers printed her image. Sailors spoke her name with pride. She represented not victory, but resolve, the refusal to surrender even in the face of surprise and overwhelming force. Salvage crews went to work almost immediately. Her fires were extinguished, her flooded compartments pumped dry, and her damaged hull patched. The Navy understood that Nevada's survival carried psychological weight. To repair her was to declare that the United States would not remain on its knees. Over months of painstaking labor, Nevada was restored, modernized, and returned to service. New anti-aircraft guns bristled along her decks. Radar systems replaced outdated optics. She emerged not as a relic, but as a reborn instrument of war. When she returned to the sea, she carried the memory of Pearl Harbor with her into every mission. Across the Atlantic, Nevada escorted convoys threatened by German submarines, her presence a shield against unseen killers below the waves. In June 1944, she steamed toward the coast of France as part of the greatest amphibious invasion in history. On D-Day, Nevada's guns thundered against German fortifications at Utah Beach, hurling shells inland with devastating precision. Where soldiers advanced under fire, Nevada answered with steel. Later, in the Pacific, she repeated the role, bombarding Japanese defenses at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Each salvo echoed the lessons learned at Pearl Harbor: never wait, never hesitate, never assume safety. By the time the war drew to a close in 1945, Nevada had survived what few ships in history ever had: a surprise attack, years of global warfare, and constant exposure to death. Yet the world she returned to was no longer the one she had defended. A new weapon had emerged, one that made battleships seem suddenly ancient. The atomic bomb had rewritten the rules of war, and Nevada's final test was still ahead. When the guns of World War II finally fell silent in 1945, the world USS Nevada returned to was almost unrecognizable from the one she had defended with such stubborn resolve. The oceans were no longer ruled solely by steel armor and 16-inch guns, and victory had not been sealed by fleets meeting in open water. Instead, the future of warfare had been decided by a single blinding flash that turned entire cities into ash. The atomic bomb had ended the war, and in doing so, it had rendered battleships like Nevada suddenly obsolete. For decades, these floating fortresses had been the ultimate expression of national power, symbols of industrial might and strategic dominance. Now they stood in the shadow of a weapon so powerful that it made armor meaningless. Military planners faced an urgent and terrifying question: what effect would nuclear weapons have on the strongest ships ever built? To answer that question, the US Navy selected a group of aging warships that had survived the war, and among them was Nevada. She had endured Pearl Harbor. She had crossed oceans under threat of submarines. She had fired in anger at both European and Pacific shores. Now she would face a force no sailor had ever encountered. In early 1946, Nevada was stripped of much of her remaining combat equipment. Her once proud guns were removed or rendered inactive. Her interior spaces were cleared. Then came the most striking transformation of all. Her hull was painted a bright, unnatural orange, chosen so scientists could track her during the coming tests. The color made her impossible to miss, standing out against the blue of the Pacific like a warning sign to the world. Towed to the remote Bikini Atoll, Nevada joined a ghostly armada assembled for Operation Crossroads, the first peacetime nuclear weapons tests in history. Dozens of ships, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines sat unmanned at anchor, their decks silent, their guns forever quiet. The fleet looked ready for battle, yet no crew stood aboard them. Humanity was about to test a weapon that did not care about courage, discipline, or experience. On July 1, 1946, the first test, known as Able, was detonated. A nuclear bomb exploded in the air above the lagoon. The flash was brighter than the sun. Heat raced outward at unimaginable speed. A massive shockwave slammed into the assembled ships. Nevada, positioned close to the blast, absorbed the impact head-on. Her superstructure was torn apart. Paint was burned away. Metal twisted. Yet when the smoke cleared, Nevada was still afloat. She had survived another attempt to destroy her. The second test, Baker, was even more terrifying. Detonated underwater, it lifted millions of tons of seawater into the air, forming a towering radioactive column that collapsed back onto the fleet. The water itself became a weapon, flooding compartments, crushing hulls, and contaminating everything it touched. Again, Nevada remained afloat, but she was now lethally radioactive. The ship that had once carried men into battle could no longer be safely boarded. She was towed away, scarred, contaminated, and officially obsolete. The Navy debated her fate. Repair was pointless. Preservation was impossible. Yet even in this final phase of her existence, Nevada continued to serve. In 1948, she was used as a target during live fire exercises. Modern weapons struck her again and again: shells, rockets, torpedoes, each impact testing new tactics and technologies. At last, after absorbing punishment that would have destroyed almost any other vessel, Nevada finally succumbed. She rolled and sank beneath the Pacific, disappearing into the deep, far from the harbor where she had first earned her legend. For decades, she lay forgotten, her exact resting place unknown, her story fading into footnotes of naval history. But history has a way of resurfacing. Advances in deep-sea exploration eventually made it possible to search for wrecks once considered lost forever. More than 70 years after she sank, explorers finally located Nevada on the ocean floor. There she rested, broken but unmistakable, her hull bearing the scars of every era of warfare she had survived. Pearl Harbor had failed to destroy her. Conventional war had not broken her. Even nuclear fire had not immediately ended her life. Few objects in human history can claim such a journey. Nevada's story is not merely the story of a ship, it is the story of an age. She was born in a world that believed in armor and artillery. She survived an attack that reshaped global history. She fought in a war that spanned the planet, and she ended her days as a test subject for weapons that threatened civilization itself. In steel and rivets, Nevada carried the full arc of 20th century warfare. Today, resting silently beneath the sea, she serves as a submerged monument not just to those who served aboard her, but to a moment in history when humanity stood at the crossroads between industrial war and atomic annihilation. Her guns will never fire again. Her engines will never turn. But her story endures, reminding us that even the strongest creations of mankind are temporary, and that the true legacy of war is written not in victories alone, but in survival, sacrifice, and the lessons we choose to remember.